The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and addressed to me in elegant, unfamiliar script. It arrived on a day like any other, a Tuesday, rain slicking the windows of our tiny apartment, the air inside smelling faintly of stale cooking and damp laundry. Lily was coloring at the chipped formica table, humming tunelessly. I tore the envelope open, expecting another bill, maybe a flyer for a new pizza place. Instead, it was a legal letterhead, and a name I barely knew. Agnes Vance, my great-great-aunt on my mother's side, the side that had walled itself off from us decades ago when my mother married my father, a man they deemed unsuitable. My mother had carried the silence like a stone in her gut until the day she died. Agnes was the one they whispered about, even before the disowning, the recluse, the one who stayed in the old house when the rest moved to the city. The letters spoke of an estate, a sole beneficiary, me, and the property. The house, it came with conditions. Live there for 12 consecutive months without leaving for more than a few days at a time. Fulfill the residency clause, and the house, along with a modest trust, was mine. Fail, and it went to a historical society. My first thought wasn't about family history or reconciliation. It was about Lily, her small hand gripping a crayon, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her future felt as precarious as a house of cards. We were living paycheck to paycheck, sometimes less than that. My days were a blur of juggling 2 minimum wage jobs, the diner in the morning, the cleaning service in the evenings, just to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. Every unexpected expense, every sniffle from Lily that might mean a doctor's visit sent a jolt of panic through me. Daycare costs ate up a terrifying chunk of what little I earned. And after daycare, I had to leave Lily in crowded rooms for hours, alone, watching her from a distance while I scrubbed floors or poured coffee for strangers. Security wasn't just a fantasy. It felt like a cruel joke that the universe played. This house, this inheritance, it wasn't just a property. It was solid ground beneath our feet, space to breathe, a chance for Lily to grow up without the hardship of poverty that I grew up with. This was a way out. It felt like a twist of fate of sorts, a gift from a family that had given us nothing. It was a gift I couldn't afford to refuse. "We're going on a little adventure, Lil," I said, my voice a little too bright. She looked up, her eyes wide and hopeful. Packing was quick. We didn't have much, just a few boxes and a couple of suitcases. We left the ratty old furniture behind and drove away in my 20-year-old car. The drive felt endless, the landscape growing more remote, the trees pressing closer to the road. The town was small, sleepy, the kind where people knew your business before you parked the car. The property was outside of it, down a long, unpaved drive that swallowed the car whole. The house loomed against the bruised twilight sky, a skeletal structure of dark wood and vacant windows. It wasn't charmingly old. It was aggressively ancient, hunkering down as if trying to sink back into the earth. The air outside was damp and smelled of pine needles and decay. The air inside was worse. It hit me like a physical weight the moment I pushed the front door open. Cold, yes, but more than that. A dense, still air that felt like it had been trapped for centuries. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of light from the open door, thick as fog. The smell was a cloying mix of mildew, something metallic like pennies, and a faint, sweetish odor that made my stomach clench, like rotting flowers, or maybe something worse. Lily, usually bubbling with energy, pressed herself against my leg, her small body rigid. Her eyes, usually so bright, were wide and darting nervously around the cavernous foyer. "It's dark, Daddy," she whispered, her voice small. "Just needs the lights turned on, sweetie," I said, fumbling for a switch near the door. It clicked, uselessly. Of course. Power would need to be turned on. We spent the first night huddled in sleeping bags in the living room, the only space that felt remotely habitable after a quick sweep with a flashlight. The silence of the house wasn't empty, it was full of creaks and groans, the settling of old wood, the whisper of wind through unseen gaps. But sometimes, beneath those natural sounds, there was something else, a faint, almost imperceptible scrape, like fingernails on stone from somewhere deep within the walls. I told myself it was mice. Old houses had mice. My goal was simple: make it through the year. Keep Lily safe and happy within these walls, no matter how unsettling they felt. I would need to work hard to make this house bright and comfortable for Lily. And my motivation was a fierce, burning need to give her what I'd never had. A future built on stability instead of shifting sand. This house was the price, and I was willing to pay it. We started with Lily's room. I chose the one with the biggest window, hoping sunlight would chase away the gloom. Cleaning was an endless task. Dust lay inches thick on every surface. Shrouded furniture stood like sentinels. As I pulled sheets off chairs and tables, a faint, unsettling pattern emerged. Agnes hadn't just left things. She seemed to have arranged them with deliberate, peculiar care. Objects grouped together in ways that felt less like decoration and more like markers. I started exploring the house more deliberately, not just cleaning, but searching. Searching for a source for the sounds, for drafts, for anything that could explain away the growing sense of dread I had started to feel. I checked the attic, the basement, and found nothing unusual. In the basement was a root cellar, damp and smelling of earth, with that same metallic sweetness from the front hall. There were strange symbols chalked on the stone walls, faded but still visible. Geometric shapes that didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. How strange. Upstairs, in what must have been Agnes's study, I found books, not novels, but dense, leather-bound volumes on obscure topics. Local folklore, celestial charts, outdated physics texts, and books filled with diagrams of impossible machines and intricate, nonsensical patterns. I didn't understand most of it, but the sheer volume of it, the obsessive detail, spoke of a mind deeply preoccupied with things outside the norm. But who am I to judge? The air in that study felt different, thicker, colder. Sometimes, standing in the center of the room, the light seemed to bend just slightly. The edges of my vision would blur. A high-pitched whine would fill my ears. So faint, I questioned if I was imagining it, but persistent enough to make my teeth ache. The sounds in the house began to sharpen, to demand attention. The scraping wasn't just the random scurry of mice anymore. It had a rhythm, a deliberate drag that seemed to move along the baseboards of Lily's room when the rest of the house was still. It was slow, persistent, like something heavy being pulled across rough stone just out of sight. Then came the tapping, not the sharp rap of a branch against glass, but a soft, insistent tap, 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 tap. It seemed to come from inside the walls, sometimes near Lily's bed, sometimes near the headboard of my own. The faint tapping on the walls would sometimes match the rhythm of my own heartbeat in a chilling echo. It was hesitant, almost curious, and it raised the fine hairs on my arms. After a while, Lily stopped talking about the scratchy sounds and started speaking of the quiet friends who lived in the walls. She would sit, sometimes for long stretches, staring intently at a patch of plaster, a slow smile spreading across her face as if listening to a private joke. Her small hands would sometimes reach out, fingers tracing patterns in the air that corresponded with nothing that I could see. Her eyes, wide and innocent, would follow something invisible moving across the ceiling above her bed. She'd giggle, a light, airy sound that felt chillingly out of place in the heavy silence of the house. It wasn't the nervous giggle of a child afraid of the dark. It was the genuine amusement of someone interacting with a playmate that only they could perceive. A knot of ice formed in my stomach and spread outwards. I couldn't stand the thought of her alone with whatever was making those sounds, drawing her attention. One afternoon, Lily was playing with her dolls in the living room. I was trying to read one of Agnes's less dense books, my mind struggling to focus, when suddenly Lily giggled. "Look, Daddy, the quiet friend is playing too." I looked up. Her dolls, which had been scattered on the rug, were now arranged in a neat circle around a small, smooth stone that hadn't been there before. They were facing inward, as if watching the stone. A cold dread washed over me. It wasn't just in the walls anymore. It was in the room with us, playing with my daughter's toys. I snatched Lily up, holding her tight. "Let's play in the kitchen, sweetie," I said, my voice trembling. As I backed away, my eyes fixed on the circle of dolls, one of them slowly, deliberately toppled over. The doll lay on its side, its button eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. The other dolls remained in their perfect, unsettling circle around the smooth, foreign stone. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic bird trapped in a cage. This wasn't a draft. This wasn't the house settling. This was deliberate. A cold sweat slicked my palms. Lily, still in my arms, giggled again. A bright, innocent sound that felt like a scream in the face of what I had just seen. "He likes my dolls, Daddy," she chirped, reaching a hand towards the fallen doll. I pulled her tighter, turning away from the circle. "Let's go find a snack," I said, my voice strained, leading her quickly towards the kitchen. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see that the doll had righted itself and was now watching us leave. That night, the tapping returned, but it wasn't hesitant anymore. It was louder, more insistent. A rhythmic rap, rap, rap against the wall just behind the headboard of the bed where Lily and I lay, huddled together. It felt like a demand, like something was trying to get in or get out. I buried my face in the pillow, trying to block out the sound, but it seemed to vibrate through the mattress, through my bones. Lily stirred beside me, whimpering softly in her sleep. I held her tighter, my arms a desperate shield. The house itself seemed to shift and change around us. Walking down the hallway, the distance to the living room sometimes felt impossibly long, the floorboards stretching and groaning beneath my feet, as if protesting my passage. Doors I was certain I had closed would be open, revealing dark rooms that felt colder and deeper than they should. The air in certain spots would suddenly grow heavy, thick, and difficult to breathe, pressing in on my chest until I had to gasp for air. Then, just as quickly, it would lighten, leaving me trembling. Lily's quiet friends became more active. I'd find her talking to empty chairs, setting out small piles of toys, as if for invisible playmates. She started drawing pictures, not of stick figures or suns, but of intricate geometric patterns that looked eerily similar to the symbols I'd seen chalked on the basement walls. Her drawings were unsettlingly precise for a child her age, lines intersecting in impossible angles, shapes folding into themselves. When I asked her about them, she'd just smile. "The quiet friends showed me," she'd say, her eyes distant. One afternoon, I was trying to hang a picture in the hallway, a small, framed photo of Lily and me, smiling on a rare beach trip. I had my back to the far end of the hall, focused on finding the stud in the wall. The air behind me grew still, the faint dust motes that usually danced in the silver light from the nearest window freezing in place. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I didn't hear anything, no footsteps, no creak of the floorboards, but the feeling was undeniable, a heavy, focused presence directly behind me. It felt like someone standing inches away, their breath held, their gaze fixed intently on my back. My hands trembled, fumbling with the hammer. I wanted to turn, to confirm that there was nothing there, but a primal instinct screamed at me not to. To move would be to acknowledge it, to invite it closer. I stood frozen, the silence stretching, the feeling of being observed so intense it felt like a physical touch. After what felt like an eternity, the air shifted, the dust motes resumed their dance, and the oppressive feeling lifted, leaving me weak and trembling, the hammer slipping from my nerveless fingers to clatter on the floor. The feeling of being watched intensified. It wasn't just a cold pressure now. It felt like eyes, countless unseen eyes, following my every movement in the dark. When I closed my eyes, I saw fleeting, impossible shapes in the blackness behind my eyelids, angles that shouldn't exist, colors that weren't in the visible spectrum. I'd snap my eyes open, but the darkness of the room was absolute, offering no explanation, only the certainty that I was not alone. My sleep deprivation became a physical ache. My thoughts felt fuzzy, my reflexes slow. I was constantly on edge, jumping at every creak, every shadow. The wind outside, when it blew, didn't sound like wind anymore. It sounded like a low, mournful sigh, an immense, sorrowful exhalation that wrapped around the house, pressing against the windows as if trying to get in. The metallic sweet smell in the air grew stronger, sometimes accompanied by a faint, high-pitched hum that seemed to resonate deep within my skull. It was like a silent scream, a vibration that felt fundamentally wrong. One morning, I woke to find Lily standing by the bedroom door, her hand outstretched towards the doorknob. Her eyes were wide, fixed on something in the hallway I couldn't see. A low, guttural sound, like wet stone grinding against wet stone, echoed from the darkness beyond the door. It wasn't the house settling. It wasn't the wind. It was something large, something heavy, moving just out of sight. My blood ran cold. I scrambled out of bed, grabbing Lily and pulling her back against me. The doorknob began to turn, slowly, deliberately. My breath hitched. It stopped. Then a soft, insistent tap against the wood, right beside the knob. Tap, 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 tap. The same rhythm from the walls. I backed away from the door, pulling Lily with me until my back hit the far wall. We stood there, trembling, listening to the silence stretch and strain on the other side of the wood. After what felt like an eternity, I heard a faint scrape receding down the hallway. It's gone. I have to get Lily to safety. I have to leave this house. The thought hit me with the force of a physical blow, shattering the fear-induced paralysis. My legs felt shaky, but they held me. I scooped Lily into my arms, her small body warm and heavy against my chest. We had to get out, now. I moved quickly, driven by a raw, primal instinct to flee. Moving down the stairs, the old wood groaned louder than usual, each step a potential trap. The air in the foyer felt thicker than ever, heavy with that sickening, sweet metallic smell. My eyes darted towards the front door, the solid wooden barrier that separated us from the outside. Freedom. I reached for the doorknob, my hand shaking. It was cold, unnaturally cold, even through my skin. I gripped it and turned. It didn't budge. I tried again, harder this time, putting my shoulder into it. Nothing. It was locked. Not just locked, but stuck, fused. I rattled it, twisted it, pounded on the wood, a frantic, desperate rhythm that echoed the frantic beat of my heart. The heavy silence of the house seemed to press in on me, mocking my efforts. I spun around, looking for another way out. The windows, they were old, painted shut, many of them warped and cracked. I ran to the nearest one in the living room. I clawed at the sash, digging my fingernails into the ancient paint. It wouldn't budge. I tried another and another, all sealed tight, like the house was holding its breath. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my fear. We were trapped, not just by the terms of a will, but by the house itself, by whatever was in it. The feeling of being watched intensified, no longer a cold pressure, but a suffocating blanket. 1,000 unseen eyes pressing in on me from every shadow, every corner. The air around me seemed to vibrate with a silent, expectant energy. I could feel the house around me, not just the walls and floors, but something deeper, something alive. I felt the slow, silent expansion and contraction I'd noticed before, but it was now more pronounced, a subtle give and take in the very structure that made my stomach churn. The walls seemed to subtly bulge inward, then recede. A sickening sense of being swallowed and then exhaled. It was breathing. The house was breathing, and we were inside its lungs. The sound started again, not the scraping or the tapping this time, but a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It vibrated through the floorboards, up through my feet, into my teeth, making them ache. It wasn't a sound meant for human ears, but a frequency that resonated with something deep inside me, a fundamental wrongness that spoke of impossible spaces and alien physics. Lily stirred in my arms, whimpering. "Daddy? What's that noise?" "It's okay, sweetie," I whispered, pulling her closer, my voice thin and reedy. "Just the old house." But I knew it wasn't just the old house. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming now, a focused, intense gaze that seemed to emanate from the very air around me. It wasn't predatory, not like an animal hunting. It was possessive, like a collector admiring a rare specimen, and its attention was fixed on Lily. The metallic sweet smell intensified, thick and cloying, filling my mouth until it tasted like blood. The air grew heavy, thick, and difficult to breathe, pressing in on my chest. The shadows in the corners of the room deepened into impossible blacks, seeming to detach themselves from the walls and writhe, coalescing into vague, shifting shapes that defied description. I backed away from the door, away from the windows, pulling Lily into the center of the room, the only place that felt marginally less oppressive. My mind raced, a whirlwind of terror and frantic calculation. How do I protect her? How do I get us out of here? But the house held us fast. Suddenly the house went utterly quiet, the kind of silence that screams louder than any noise. No creaks, no groans, no wind sighing, just a profound, unnatural hush that pressed in on my eardrums until they ached. Lily was beside me, her small hand clutching my shirt, her eyes wide and fixed on something I couldn't see in the corner of the room. The low hum intensified, vibrating through the floor, up through her small body. Her eyelids fluttered, her grip on my shirt loosened, her head tilted back, her mouth falling slightly open. A soft, sighing breath escaped her lips, and her eyes closed. Her body went limp in my arms. She was out cold, right there in the middle of the floor, surrounded by the thickening air and the deepening shadows. I knelt, gently laying her down on the rug, my heart pounding a desperate rhythm against the silence. She wasn't just asleep. Something had taken her consciousness, and I was alone. The air in the room began to thicken, not just cold, but like breathing water. The shadows in the corners didn't just deepen, they detached, becoming independent entities that pulsed with a silent, dark energy. The walls of the room seemed to recede. The ceiling stretched upwards into impossible heights, the familiar lines of the room warping and twisting. A pressure built in my head, intense and overwhelming. It wasn't pain, but a flood of pure sensation, of alien concepts and perceptions. I saw not with my eyes, but with my mind, impossible geometries twisting in dark, silent spaces. I felt the vastness of something ancient and indifferent, something that existed outside the flow of time as I understood it. And then the presence focused on me. It wasn't a voice, but a direct impression, a download of understanding into my consciousness. It showed me the house, not as wood and stone, but as an anchor point, a knot in the fabric of reality. It showed me my bloodline, a thread connected to this anchor. It showed me Agnes, the previous custodian. This wasn't a haunting, it was presence, and it needed the anchor maintained. And then it made its offer, not in words, but in a chillingly clear exchange of needs and possibilities. My need, security for my child. Its need, stability in this reality. The house, the inheritance, the future I craved for Lily, all of it was contingent on my acceptance. Accept the role of custodian, maintain the anchor, allow its presence. And in return, the house was ours, permanently, securely. The house would provide a future free from struggle for Lily. My terror was immense, a tidal wave threatening to drown me. This wasn't a ghost to be appeased or banished. This was a cosmic entity offering a pact, a horrifying, soul-shattering bargain. My sanity screamed at me to run, to grab Lily and flee into the night. Consequences be damned. But my eyes were drawn back to Lily, lying so still on the rug. The entity's presence focused on me, seemed to emanate from the space just above her sleeping form. It was waiting. It wanted my answer. And in that moment of ultimate terror and desperate love, a single desperate thought formed in my mind, directed at the vastness that surrounded me. Lily. The thought was raw, a plea and a demand. Leave her. Let her grow up. Let her have a life outside this, until it's her time. The pressure in my head pulsed, a silent acknowledgement. The alien perceptions shifted, focusing on the condition I had just offered. There was no human emotion in the response, no argument or disagreement as I understood it, just a sense of immense, ancient consideration. And then, a subtle shift in the air, a lessening of the intense focus on Lily's form, a sense of the vast presence turning its full attention back to me. The condition was accepted. The bargain was understood. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the unnatural silence. My breath hitched in my throat, my hands clenched into fists, and then, driven by a force older and deeper than my own fear, a force that resided in the very core of my being, I made my choice. I didn't speak. I couldn't. But in my mind, I opened myself. I accepted the understanding. I embraced the horrifying truth. I would be the custodian. I would maintain the anchor. I would bind myself and my daughter and her descendants to this house and the entity within it. The pressure eased. The room slowly and sickeningly returned to its normal shape. The shadows settled, though they seemed deeper now, more watchful. The thick air thinned, leaving behind only that faint, metallic sweet scent. The intense fear receded, replaced by a cold, heavy stillness. The presence was still here, but it felt different, less like a storm, more like a vast, silent ocean. It was no longer testing, it was settled. I stayed there for a long time, listening to Lily's soft breathing, feeling the weight of the house around us. I had achieved my goal. I had secured her future. The house was ours. The inheritance was ours. But the price was paid in something far more valuable than money. I looked at Lily again, her small face illuminated by the faint light from the window. She was safe, for now, but she was also bound to this house, to the presence. She would grow up here, under its silent gaze. She would inherit not just property, but a responsibility she couldn't possibly comprehend yet. The house is quiet tonight. The tapping has stopped. The scraping is gone, but the silence feels heavier than before. It is the silence of a bargain struck, of a future secured at a terrible cosmic cost. We are not haunted, we are owned. And the weight of the house, the weight of the future I have chosen, is just beginning to settle upon us.